Good afternoon. I hope that you can hear me. Um, I'm hoping that I can get some people in the class. I see Sassy Girl. Hey, Sassy. You and I both know. And shout out to Trees. Follow her on All About the Trees and Trees Us. We know that if we're not cussed out at least once a day, that we ain't loved. Oh my God. Um, I just wanted to shout her out. There's so many that I do follow. I wanted to shout her out today because I got cussed out today. um, anyway, and I'm sure that if a particular person was still online, that person would think that he had to protect me somehow and would have to feel sorry for me, but that's fine. Anyway, um, oh, good. I'm glad you can hear me, Sassy. uh, put some likes in. People on Facebook, put some likes on. Do follow. I have two pages on Facebook. I have a professional page as well as my profile page, and I would appreciate if you would follow. On YouTube, I would appreciate people subscribing. Do like the video, and what I'm going to do is I think I found a way to show the commencement speech for Morehouse College because it's so important. But before I begin, I do need to um, talk about who I am and what I do for people who may be coming into the chat and don't know who I am. My name is Dr. Cynthia Ali Smith. My doctorate is in educational leadership, with my focus being in higher education. I received, I was conferred with my doctorate in 2018, and I had already been retired from my position as a manager director of information technology, which my undergraduate or BSIT was in. My master's degree is in writing studies, and I am first and foremost a writer, and I write essays for Medium, and I do sometimes contribute to the Baldwin for Medium. Um, First and foremost, though, and this is what I'm going to do until I go to the great beyond, and that is I'm going to remain an anti-racism and anti-white supremacism educator, an essayist, an advocate, because it's so important that we learn not to be uh, not to be uh, ashamed of our heritage, even though that heritage was bondage at the hands of people who enslaved us many generations ago, and who still, uh, through the use of a system of denial and discrimination, want to uh, keep their status, retain their status, the status that they created for themselves way back when, as being so called superior based on a color that had its own distinction of uh, quote unquote superiority over another color before it even before it was even assigned to the skins of human beings. So I specialize in essays and presentations with alternative views of race, race as color, race as character, and people who have been coming to class. I'm sure you're beginning to realize that they are two different things. Race as color is race as determined by color. Racist character is race is determined by character. And both are used within the system of racism and white supremacy. So I offer more critical perspectives on these subjects. And what's most important is that I include the potential implications of racialized wording in the US language lexicon that are not ordinarily considered. For example, we're going to be talking about individualism today. And when you hear that word, when you hear the word individual, it just kind of goes in your ear and you go, okay, I'm an individual, you're an individual, we are individual people. But guess what? Guess what? That term has been weaponized against us. And it is one of the reasons why we use groupthink instead of seeing ourselves as individuals. So, before I get to that part, I'm going to go through what it is that's important for you to use before we begin. And what is that, class? Comprehension, context, and connotation, what I call the 3 C's of navigating through the language system of racism and white supremacy. So, first up is comprehension. Comprehension is the essence of understanding what you are saying, being told, writing, or reading, or the ability of one's mind to form and craft imagery and concepts from the words. You understand that? That's what comprehension is. Next, context. Context is the ability to understand or comprehend the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms through which it can be fully understood and assessed. You get that? If you don't understand, if you don't comprehend nothing, you won't understand in what for what reason is this are these words being spoken, or what you're reading, or what's what somebody's saying to you. You won't understand that, and you won't understand, and so basically you won't comprehend if you don't understand the context by which it is being assessed or analyzed. Of course, the last but not the least is connotation. And connotation is the ability of the words to summon emotion or an idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning. Now, what do I mean when I say connotation? Well, it's the feeling of the words being spoken. And here on YouTube, this is what is most important. And I think that this is what causes people to react in particular ways, because it is the expressive part. It's that part of the words, sentences, and paragraphs from thought which create the drama and cause people to react violently, sadly, happily, or otherwise. So keep these 3 tools in your arsenal of tools as you navigate through the system of racism and its ideology, white supremacy. All right, now that that is done, if there's anybody in here who would like, who likes this kind of information, do like the video, and do share it among people that you believe would benefit from it. Now, before I begin discussing individualism, I want to attempt again to bring up this commencement speech by the governor. I believe he's the governor of Maryland. I'm not sure, but the speech was so profound for me because it talks about the fact that we need history. We need to know what happened before. We need to know the when. The history is the when in order for you to understand the why. So I'm going to attempt to bring this up, and I am hoping that you'll be able to hear it this time. Okay?
Good morning.
Can you hear
It
it?
is good being here in the house.
If you can hear it, give me some light bulbs.
I am absolutely honored to be with each and every one of you. Bless you and thank you. Dr. Thomas, thank you. Thank you for this
If you can hear it, give me
for
some
this
light
true,
bulbs.
true honor. And to Chairman Woods, to our administrators, to the alumni, and also if I can just give a personal point of privilege when I say alumni, if I could ask Dr. Trailer from the class of '53 to just stand real quick and just say how beautiful it is to see you, a member of the class of 1953. And Dr. Trailer, while it's wonderful to see you, I have to say, it's good seeing you, Uncle Trey. That's my godfather. So I hope by getting this honorary degree, I made you proud, sir. I am incredibly thankful to be here also with the remarkable faculty, the remarkable staff, the remarkable team here. All the members of the board, to include my friend and my Maryland brother, Reverend Coates. It's great to see you as well, sir. It's great to be with you. And also to this amazing class who's standing in front of me here, the class of 2023. Congratulations, y'all. Now, I didn't go to Morehouse, but I had the privilege, and I have the privilege, of calling many Morehouse men friends and advisors and mentors. I have personally witnessed the kindness and the courage and the confidence that truly does define that measure of Morehouse mystique. The idea that makes this place so special. And so very soon for each of you, you are going to walk across this stage, and in that moment, each of you will go from being a man of Morehouse to a Morehouse man. And it's a title that you're going to hold on to the rest of your life. But it's a title that says so much more than just about where you went to school. It says you're a man of strong character and a disciplined mind. It says that you're a man of vision and virtue. It says that you got all of your Crown Forum credits in. It's a title that each and every one of you shouldn't just be proud of, but you've earned it. You've earned this. And it's a title that I know for all of you that you are going to be very proud, and I know you will be very proud to be a Morehouse man because, as the saying goes, how do you know you're in a room with a Morehouse man? They'll tell you in the first 3 minutes of the conversation. But the truth is, the reason they're going to tell you is because there is a common pride that Morehouse men share. And it's not just a pride in yourself, and it's not just a pride in your accomplishments. It's a pride in your history. And graduates and graduations are by nature a celebration of the future. But I want to spend a minute just to talk a little bit about the past. I want to spend a minute to talk to you a little bit about history. Because while each of you worked very hard to get here, this degree is not a product of your hard work alone. As a black man in America, we know that our present is a result of the fights and the struggles and the victories of the past. We are here because there were people who marched. We are here because there were people who prayed over generations. We're here because there are people who fought for you and they didn't even know you. People who didn't even know you, but they believed in the hope of you. People who believed in the hope of you, and they knew that they would not get a chance to see the realization of their sacrifice in their own lifetimes. People honored here on Century Campus, where Dr. King studied, where Dr. Mays is laid to rest, where Union soldiers died for freedom. These individuals and their struggles have served as the foundation of our fortune. And because of them, you are standing on a foundation that is, as said in Psalm 61, a rock that is higher than I. Do not forget the rocks that you are standing on, men of Morehouse. Those rocks are the rocks that allow you to stand tall. They're the rocks that allow you to see so far. They're the rocks that allow you to hold your head so high that you can reach the crown of expectations laid before you. You stand on the rocks of generations. And since history is one of the things that helped you to get here, it's the very thing that's going to help you to move forward. I come here today knowing that history helped guide me. Because a few years ago, no one could have believed that I could have been elected governor of my state. And it wasn't just because I was polling at 1% either. And that's true. The first poll that we took, I looked and I was polling at 1%. I'm Not Voting was polling higher than Westmore. But it wasn't just because of that people didn't think that I could become governor. It's because no one thought the people who looked like you and me could actually lead Maryland. A state that was once the home of one of the largest slave ports in America. A state that even into the 20th century still had black men lynched in their own streets and in their own neighborhoods. A state that was the birthplace and the proving grounds of redlining and other discriminatory and predatory housing policies that have served as one of the greatest wealth thefts that we have seen in our nation's history. That history is still fresh. And that history is still being felt. So in the early days of our campaign, people would ask me, they say, how do you possibly think that you can win? And my answer was simple. Because I know our full history. Because Maryland has a long and a troubled history, absolutely, but Maryland also has a history of courage. A history of leaders and thinkers and writers and scholars, people who struggled but had the strength to overcome. And their contributions paved the way not just for me to run for office, but their stories helped me to see the path. People like Reginald Lewis helped me see the path, who was the first black man to build a multi-billion-dollar company in the history of the United States of America. People like Cab Calloway helped me to see the path, who's one of the first black men to break the color barrier in the entertainment industry. Lily Mae Jackson helped me to see the path. She founded the Baltimore City NAACP and is known as the mother of the Civil Rights Movement. Benjamin Banneker helped me to see the path, who typified black excellence and black ingenuity. And after a lifetime of success, left this message for future generations. Never abandon your vision. Keep reaching to further your dreams. On the campaign trail, I spoke about our history openly. And in the privacy of my own home, and particularly on the hard days, I studied this history and it refueled my faith. I studied these bold, brave men and women, and I saw the hatred and horror in their time and how they pushed on anyway. Their grandeur enlarged by the terror that they faced. Men of Morehouse, I stand before you as the first Black governor of my state and only the third Black governor ever to be elected in the history of this country with a very simple message. Our history is our power. And I've come to tell you this, that we have got to hold our history close. Because life will test you. And when it does, your history will give you the power to meet the challenge. Because out in the world, people will seek to minimize your history. Out in the world, people will seek to rewrite your history. Out in the world, many people will seek to have you forget your history. I look around the country and I see book banning. I'm looking around the country right now and I'm seeing people being censored, teachers being censored. I see curriculum of truth being taken out. This is not just a threat to our history, it is a threat to our strength. When politicians ban books and muzzle educators, they say it's an effort to prevent discomfort and guilt. But we know that's not true. This is not about a fear of making people feel bad. It is about a fear of people understanding their power. This is a fear of you realizing that you come from a long line of titans, of visionaries, of dreamers, of pioneers, of people who defied the odds and helped build this nation with their hands, their hearts, and their minds. And what is happening now with our history is just the beginning. I fear we are watching the early decay of a deep rot that threatens to hollow out our future by eliminating our past. Those who yearn to destroy history will not stop at our history. They will go after the history of those we know too. I'm talking about our friends in the indigenous community. I'm talking about our friends in the Jewish community. I'm talking about our friends in the Asian community. I'm talking about our friends in the gay community. I'm talking about our mothers and daughters and our sisters. I'm talking about everybody in this country who has ever been a part of the American story. And who we are watching the stories of those who came before us be wiped away. A threat to any history is a threat to all history. When a student is put under investigation by their school after delivering a presentation on the Stonewall riots, that doesn't just hurt the LGBTQ community. It's coming after us all. When a book about the life and achievements of baseball legend Roberto Clemente is banned, that doesn't just hurt the Puerto Rican community. They're coming after all of us. When a school board revises curriculum to edit out writings on Japanese internment in America, it does not just hurt the AAPI community, it is hurting us all. And I can think of few greater threats to this nation than this threat to history. Because this threat is going to have lasting consequences. Not only because those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it, but because those who do not learn their past will never learn their own power. And today I'm calling on each and every one of you, the entire class of 2023, to confront this threat as you move on to the next stage of your life. Celebrate your history. Unapologetic about your history. Who would finish? This is history. Both of us. by Black artists. Understand the lives of Black leaders. Surround your life with the emblems of our past, knowing it isn't enough to be a passive recipient of history. You must be an active custodian. That understanding our history drives my intentionality. And that intentionality underscores my azimuth. On the morning of my inauguration, I asked a group of a few hundred people to join me at the Annapolis docks to honor the enslaved men and women who had been taken there against their will. We had a wreath-laying ceremony, and then we marched to the State House, a place that was built by enslaved people. And in that location is where I was sworn in as the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland. And immediately after we did that, the attacks came. People who said he is using his first moments as governor for indoctrination. And my response was simple. This is not indoctrination. This is history. We organized that ceremony at the docks with intentionality. Not to diminish anyone, but to empower everyone. We did it with love, not to inspire guilt, but to inspire strength. And that strength gave us power. And it's a strength that I dream of for all of you. The strength of generations. Men of Morehouse, I need you to become lifelong learners and loyal ambassadors of our history. It is the only way ahead. And then, I need you to take that history and use it to make history of your own. Every great champion has used what's come before them to accomplish the next great task. By understanding the past, you understand the path. And by understanding the path, you will help blaze that trail. Helping our schools, promoting economic empowerment, creating pathways to work, wages, and wealth, not just for some, but for all. Providing second chances for people returning from incarceration, so we are making every sentence a life sentence. Calling on our fellow citizens to serve and participate in a movement that doesn't just pave over the cracks, but actually works to fix the foundation. As you move along the path of your history, you will see these themes etched into the paving stones, pointing us forward. You must learn the path because our future depends on it. In 100 years from now, a new generation of Morehouse men will be gathered right here, preparing to take their next steps. And the trail in front of them is going to be pioneered by you. You will be the rocks that they will stand on. So practice your history. Protect your history. And participate in your history by making history of your own. I am calling on you to recognize the power of your history and to use it for the betterment of all of our mankind. Choose to confront the ugliness of our past without fear. Choose to confront the hardship of our present without hesitation. Choose to move the earth by the power of your own hand and the power of your own will. And hold close the stories of those who came before you. Because those stories, they're going to make you invincible. Out in the world, the arrows will be sharp and the swords will be strong, but history is going to be your armor. History will protect you. History will inspire you. History will nourish you, it will teach you, it will guide you, and history will save you. And then you will turn around and save us. Thank you. Congratulations. Honored to be part of this lineage and continue to move forward and lead us all valiantly. God bless you, Morehouse, now and always.
Now, I don't know about you, but I was struck by that speech. And because yesterday I wanted to play it because it was directly related to what it was we were discussing in class, how history is so important. I want to read the little saying that I put in my book, and I want us to get used to hearing it because I'm going to drill that as much as I drill the 3 C's. We are living the history of our descendants. Believe it or not, we're going to have descendants. So we are living the history of our descendants. Everything we experience today will become their history because at some point we will become their ancestors. Yes, you and I are going to become an ancestor at some point. So we owe it to them to be honest about it. We owe it to them to be honest about the truth, the history of our lives here in America. Now, there were a few things that were spoken that were particularly important or interesting that I took a few notes on. I don't know whether you guys took any notes. Let me say this first. What I do is not for everybody. Not everybody is really interested in knowing about uh, our history. Not everybody is really interested in listening to and learning from it. And that's okay. So I would never want to fault anybody for not listening and not attempting to learn from what I teach. So if it's boring, then it's boring. But for those of you who want to understand, want to learn, do share, do like this video. And I'm hoping that more and more people will want to put that light bulb above their heads and say, oh, I got it. I got it. I got it. I understand. I understand. I'm going to give us a little break right now. Just a 30-second break. Okay, I'm back. And hold on 1 second. A few more seconds. How about we do 30 more seconds? Because I'm actually trying to respond to someone who texted me. So just give me a moment and let's do one more 30-second. Okay, I'm back and I'm ready. All right. There's some notes that I took on this, and I'm hoping that those of you who are watching, be it on Facebook or be it on YouTube, I hope that the commencement speech by the governor of Maryland made was helpful to you as and made you and the connotations in the words that he spoke gave you some inspiration. Okay, he said things like, "The rocks you are standing on," meaning our ancestors are the rocks that we stand on, just as we will be the rocks that our descendants stand on. He said that our ancestors believed in the hope of you and knew they might not see the success in their lifetime. That struck me particularly because I know you listen to me when I when I talk about how old I am, because I am very interested in my life experience and the fact that I am sliding down that hill now, and there is a finality. There's a beginning and an end, and at some point I'm going to be an ancestor, and I feel like I won't see the end of white supremacy and racism in my lifetime. I'm really happy for people who were able to see the first black president in their lifetime, as well as me. And he said history got us here, and it is what will take us forward. That is so important to understand. He said history is felt, and history is our power. And he said, refuel your faith by learning your history. He said, confront the threat of losing our history and take a stand. And that's really important. He mentioned the word active custodian. And that's when my heart got really full, because I accept that challenge to be an active custodian for us, for our history. So I'm going to talk to you now about individualism. But before I do that, I do want to acknowledge those of you light bulbs in the classroom today. I don't know whether you're still here, but I hope you are. And that's my sassy girl, Soraya. Do the right thing. I'm not a sample. Don't. I'm not a sample. Don't try me. I love these names. And there is Sam Be Good. I love the Roxy Verse. Hey, Roxy Verse. Yep, those of you who are in my class, and I hope that you are in still in the class. But if you're not, that's okay. I'm hoping that you will catch it on the replay. And listen, do what they call it, the replay gang. Yes, replay gang. Do hit those like buttons. Hit those like buttons. Okay. I'm going to be reading a section of the book, of the text, White Supremacy and the Post-Racial Colorblind Era, Exploring Visible and Invisible Whiteness in the United States, an Unbleached, Unbooked Look. And I'm going to be discussing that's the section on individualism. And listen carefully. And remember that I am always using the terminology, the words that we just take for granted and listen and hear, but not truly listen to. So my goal is to make you understand, make you comprehend what I'm talking about within the context being racism, race as color, race as character, and white supremacy, and have you feel the words, the thought that are translated into the language we speak. Okay? The definition for individualism is quite simple: the habit or principle of being independent and self reliant. Its root, or the term individual, is also just as simple: a single human being as distinct from a group. Are you listening to this? If you understand what those definitions mean, those are the actual literal definitions of the word individualism, with the ism suffix at the end, and the root of the word individual. If you understand, if you're still here, throw some light bulbs up for me to let me know that you understand. Otherwise, and I can move on. If not, I'll go into a little more. Um, I'll get a little deeper into the context. Okay. Hi, Riri. Riri's here. Thank you, Riri. Thanks for joining the class. If you understand what the definition of individualism is and the root term individual, then I can move on. Okay, for Riri, what I'll do is I'll begin this again. I was able to successfully play the video on the commencement speech by the governor of Maryland. The definition for individualism is quite simple: the habit or principle of being independent and self-reliant. Now, the ism at the end basically gives it something higher than just uh, what the root of the word would be. It turns the word into something else. In this case, it's like an ideology, a belief system. Okay? Individualism is the habit or principle of being independent and self reliant. The term individual is a single human being as distinct from a group. I hope you know where I'm going. The very foundation under which this nation was born was presented as a unique power stemming from the individualism of its citizens, self reliant and independent, distinct from any particular group. Everyone was American. For many progressive and liberal leaning white people, as well as many Black people who grew up during the post racial colorblind era, being individual was upheld as sacrosanct, which is most likely one of the causes of the confusion many are experiencing today with regard to white supremacy and racism in the United States. Therefore, by the beginning of the 1970s, when segregation was supposed to have ended decades of discrimination and systemic racism, Black people were also supposed to have achieved the distinction of being individual, distinct from the group from which they were cast as inferior. You understand? Certainly, the term post racial colorblind by itself probably meant an end to perceptions of race as color, and among some, the end of racism as institutional and structured. Today, they might even categorize these perceptions of race and racism as being held solely by the individual perceiver. And why? It is most likely because the person as an individual makes a conscious decision to be or not to be considered racist. To the individual, it is all about their individual personal perceptions of themselves and their particular consequential behavior. There's no doubt that during the post racial colorblind era, finally, everyone was supposed to be considered individual, an individual. There are numerous articles and texts in philosophy, sociology, and political science on the subject of individualism, and many, very many notable scholars have weighed in, quoting each other, quoting others, agreeing and disagreeing on a myriad of subtexts and conclusions on the subject. There are, in fact, partitions of individualism, according to the various trains of thought by scholars who have dissected the subject into piece parts on those bases of academic thought. It is apparent that individualism turns out to be quite complex and not so simply constructed as its initial definition suggests at all. Nevertheless, this section is not being focused on delving deeply into all the philosophical, social, or political implications, other than to state the significance as an overview of the moral, political, philosophical, and individual and ways philosophical ways individualism was being portrayed in terms of worth and value. Hear those words again: worth and value. How all Americans stood in relation to each other, even as Black Americans were simultaneously being treated as a collective problem and not as the definition of individual suggests. Individualism is not a new concept. And there are plenty of opposing arguments as to whether individualism has a place in a racialized context at all. It's easy to argue for individualism only in abstraction. Why not be one's self in all his or her or their individualized glory? Certainly, if we understand the abstract edicts of merit, remember we discussed merit in other classes, in the other class. We can understand why either or both would make logical sense as aspirations for humanity's sake. Right? Remember, let me read that definition again. An individual or individualism is the principle of being independent and self reliant. And to be an individual is to be a single human being as distinct from a group. Why would being an individual impact race? You know that when I have questions inside, I am asking these questions not for you to answer, but for you to put on your thinking cap and think critically about that question. Really dig deep. Jump into the rabbit hole of your mind and think really deeply. Why would being an individual impact race? Scholars and historians will generally agree that the influence of individualism on race appeared much more prevalent after the wars in Europe ended. However, they seem unsure about the conceivable rationales or thought processes upon which the two concepts collided and then coalesced around themselves like two warm clouds. The appeal among Black scholars and intellectuals for race as individual wasn't as widely shared because discussing race and its issues with systemic racism would have less significance. Many may have felt behaviorism applied by individuals was no respecter of the collective aspect of policies sustained through institutional structured discrimination. Yet individualistic views of race and behavior persisted throughout the post war period through the advent of civil rights movements and served to justify as inadequate even in the slightest efforts at reform of the very processes of economics, which were the backbone of the movements for employment and educational opportunity. However, just like merit and the goals of meritocracy, individualism still fell short because of the overarching paradox of living within a culture of whiteness, which had placed its determination of preeminent value upon itself as the dominant culture from which all others had to aspire as what? As individuals. How many of you get that? If we were going to be considered individuals, it was going to have to rely on merit, on achievement, on that meritocracy myth that and keep in mind they considered us as having no merit. But if we were going to be looked at as individuals and not that collective one size fits all group of criminals, we had to become, for lack of a better word, we had to support and help sustain white supremacism. Furthermore, with regard to the single critical question concerning what racism became as a result of perceived ideas about it during this period, there is a clear and present one word answer available which can explain how white people could virtually cause whiteness to disappear without even consciously trying. Individualism was and remains the lifeblood of color blindness, and its remnants exist in the country today. In addition, individualism embodies both concepts of exceptionalism and meritocracy, each innately tied to white supremacy. The Encyclopedia Britannica describes individualism as political and philosophical, underscoring the moral worth of the individual. The moral worth. But what exactly does the moral worth of an individual mean in a nation where morality is in the eye of the white gaze? By what measure Remember, these questions are for you to think critically about. What moral compass was used to engender bondage and servitude, human trafficking, and the R word? What mortality defined the destruction of each and every attempt at individualism? Now, listen to this. What morality defined the destruction of each and every attempt at individualism? Now, remember what individualism was now? Self reliance. Remember that. By their own, by the definition as provided by a dictionary written certainly not by Black people. Independent, self reliant. What morality defined the destruction of each and every attempt at individualism or independence and self reliance by Black people from the overthrow of Reconstruction to today? What moral worth leached from it philosophically and politically? If you understand what I'm reading, please throw up some light bulbs. If you're getting it, if you're getting what I'm saying. If you're not getting what I'm saying, then when I would ask you to replay. I've had people reread a number of my essays that I've written over the years. And certainly after they've read them a couple of times, I get messages that say, I got it. I didn't I didn't think of it that way. By the 19th century, various influences, as well as the concept of, quote, natural rights, were embedded into the fabric of America as its apparent manifest destiny. Natural rights, of course, had its own set of apparent superior connotations in terms of collective and individual whiteness. As described in The Philosopher, a site maintained by a team of professors and journalists discussing the English philosopher John Locke, explained that his belief in, quote, a natural right of man to have no concern for the needs of others in matters of property, and thus believed in a, quote, institution of natural law, as that term described the, quote, modes and limits of fair appropriation. Taken together, and according to the writers on the site, the natural right to property is the corollary of the fundamental right to the preservation of the individual. It is equivalent to the natural right to appropriate all that is useful to us. Apparently, these same people thought that it was their natural right to appropriate the bodies and the minds of people that they put into bondage. Clearly, people like Locke had adopted the ideals of superiority where their fundamental rights to be individual converged onto their so called natural rights as a collective. Did you get that? Let me repeat that. Clearly, people like Locke had adopted the ideals of superiority where their fundamental rights to be independent and self reliant converged or came together with their so called natural rights as a collective to take anything they pleased if it was deemed useful. This rationale was definitely one of the driving motivations for the belief in white America in taking land and treasure from the indigenous populations. Are you getting this? Oh, I love history, especially when you're seeing it through the context or the framework of how and why and when white supremacy and racism began, and why it's important to understand the context. These things didn't just happen in a vacuum, people. This rationale was definitely one of the driving motivations for the belief in white America in taking land and treasure from the indigenous populations. Adding to these philosophical and political morality structures was social Darwinism, or the belief in Anglo Saxon or Aryan cultural and biological superiority. These beliefs crept in and essentially seized the definition of individualism, formally organizing itself as dominant, not only philosophically, but politically and spiritually as well. Simultaneously with the new post racial paradigm of colorblindness from 1968 on, individuality was making its resurgence in white American culture and discourse, manifesting as the I me generation. Robin DiAngelo wrote extensively about individualism as, quote, so deeply held in dominant society that it is virtually immovable without sustained effort. She charted key dynamics inherent within racism that permeate the discourse around individuality and stated, quote, white insistence on individualism in regard to racism in particular prevents cross racial understanding, denies the salience of race and racism in our lives, and serves to reinforce and maintain racist relations. It is important to note that processes underlying racist ideologies and discourse production are largely not explicit. That is, there is no need to assume that discourses that support racist relations are intentional or even conscious. In her article, Why Can't We All Just Be Individuals? D'Angelo illustrated the kinds of challenges she faced when trying to engage white people to understand racism without them first eliminating the incessant need for individualism. She argued individualism acted, quote, to shape our perspectives and ideology, function as neo-color blindness, and reproduce the myth of meritocracy and make collective action difficult. An important takeaway from Dr. D'Angelo's thesis was the comprehensive illustration of how individualism was singularly responsible for the lack of responsibility and accountability of white people with respect to the collectivity of whiteness. Let me repeat that. An important takeaway from Dr. D'Angelo's thesis was the comprehensive illustration of how individualism was singularly responsible for the lack of responsibility and accountability of white people with respect to the collectivity of whiteness, the meritocracy myth, collective privilege, and individual privilege at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, people, this is why every time there is an act of violence committed by a white person, it is always treated as a singular event. It is not treated as though it should affect the entire culture. This is why when talking to generally talking to white people about racism and white supremacy, they will center themselves as what? Hands? Individuals, not responsible. My family didn't own slaves. In her article, oh, I got that. I said that okay. And then, oh, I said that too. Hold on, let me get my place again. Just a minute. Okay. During the post racial colorblind era, individualism was a useful tool that helped change how racism was expressed among white people toward black people. Succeeded in changing the narrative of racism into individual acts of negative or prejudiced behavior, or as Peggy McIntosh explained, acts of meanness, simply because one or the other engaging in such behavior was of a different race. I think we experienced that recently. I'm not going to mention the name of the person, but that person said that black women uh, 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 were being unfair. Uh, if what this person perceived as acts of meanness were happening to him, there was really no need to apply race to it. However, this person decided that that was the case when really they were just people in this case. Racial euphemism. Oh, moreover, this narrative made it possible for white people to accuse black people of the very policies and practices they created for the mitigation of structural systemic racism of being racist. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are in the audience or if you are in the replay, do understand. I don't care how much people will say to you that black people can be racist. We did not create the ideology to oppress ourselves, and we did not create the system of racism to perpetuate, sustain, and maintain the ideology of our own so called fallacious inferiority. Okay? That part. In the article, D'Angelo discussed an interaction between two participants who had agreed that everyone, quote, should all see each other as individuals. I mean, I'm sure that you've heard this. I'm sure that you have heard or have read or had somebody say or in some way you this has come up that everybody should just see everybody as themselves, as individuals. During a presentation where she was co facilitating, she explained, first, I had just stated that seeing each other as individuals was a perspective only available to the dominant group. Yet Sue's statement implied I had never heard or considered this most simple and popular of solutions to racism. Okay? People and understand that this is what they say. We should all see each other as one. We are all human. We are all this. We are all that. Yes. Yeah. Popular solutions, much less just raised. and critiqued it. I was left wondering yet again what happens cognitively for many whites in forums such as this that prevents them from actually hearing what is being presented. Yeah, that's what I had that mixed up. It's listening and not hearing, not hearing and not listening. It's listening to something but not hearing it. Second, why did she, as a white person, feel confident to declare one sentence and a one sentence answer to a profoundly complex and perennial dilemma of social life? Why not consider my background in the field instead instead engage me in a dialogue on the matter? Or just ask me to explain my point in more depth. I did my best to reiterate my previous position, but to no avail. By the afternoon break, Sue had walked out. As part of D'Angelo's examination into the context of discussions on individualism, or the quote, discourse of individualism, she explains such discourse as, quote, a specific set of ideas, words, symbols, and metaphors, a storyline or narrative that creates, communicates, reproduces, and reinforces the concept that each of us are unique individuals and that our memberships, such as our race, class, or gender, are not important or relevant to our opportunities. D'Angelo explained that although the authenticity of America's constitutional creed counts on the notion of equality for all, there is an inequivalence evident at the same time. The reality that the nation is grouped by race, among others, which involuntarily and with extreme emphasis influences our life circumstances and experiences. Therefore, individualism, as used by white people, serves as a declaration in the abstract of the independent action of each person, and that everyone, no matter the race of the individual, has the same opportunity for what? Achievement, and are unmarked by social positions such as race. In addition, because the very nature of individualism conceals how the system of racism influences chances for achievement in all areas of activity, it also functions ideologically to reinforce and reproduce relations of unequal power, quote unquote. Conservative courts have taken advantage of individualistic views on racism ever since the beginning of the post racial colorblind era. According to Lee N. Gordon in From Power to Prejudice, The Rise of Racial Individualism in Mid Century America, during the latter portion of the 20th century, courts used individualism to make a de facto, quote, de facto segregation. Let me say that again. Courts used individualism to, quote, make de facto separation legally invisible, end quote. This is important to note, since individualism itself was one of the chief enablers for colorblindness in this country. The transfer of race as color to race as character needed a virtual hook to engage as an invisible arbiter of equality, equity, opportunity, and justice to justify their legal prevention of opportunity for Black Americans without appearing obvious and overt, but by being neutral. In cases where racial animosity were remedied or couldn't be proven, individualism was also used to prevent desegregation. They could also retreat from affirmative action as a remedy, in many cases using individualistic logic, considered colorblind. Indeed, individualism was very useful for the courts in pushing back against desegregation and other efforts to address racial discrimination during the era. Now, considering how individualism and its connotations were applied throughout the 20th century, rugged individualism was the lens through which most white sociologists and other scholars, politicians, and many others viewed the relationship between its citizens and their upward mobility. In 1928, President Herbert Hoover used the term as part of his rhetorical platform and a staple of his presidency. This view of individualism was couched in abstraction and was by no means straightforward because it excluded race. Because it excluded race, even as race played an enormous part in the quote moral worth and admitted social construction of race and racism itself. Therefore, by excluding race from the individual, it served to exclude race from themselves in order to be seen as non racial and normal. There is no wonder why the term and its implications were dusted off and adjusted for the post racial colorblind era and is still in use today. Evidently, there is no appetite for compromises when it comes to individualism and its relationship to racism and whiteness. Stephen M. Lukes, professor of sociology, New York University, writing for Britannica, described individualism as a political and social philosophy that emphasizes the moral worth of the individual. Although the concept of an individual may seem straightforward, there are many ways of understanding it, both in theory and in practice. In Awakening to Race by Jack Turner, his focus on individualism was on two forms: democratic, which lends to the belief that one's freedom and right to exist extends to everyone and not at the expense of others, and atomistic, which he called the coarser or laissez faire bootstrapping form. During the post racial colorblind era, the atomistic form of individualism was more than apparent. Today, in this newly created area of U.S. supremacist reckoning, both forms of individualism possess clearly defined structures according to the party with whom one is affiliated. As more and more white people who welcome the challenge of fair play move into the position of democratic individualists. In either respect, however, race and racism are still placed beyond the scope of the individual white person and only allowed in spaces where whiteness decides it's appropriate whenever discussed. So, how do you feel about the term individualism today? Now, listen, I don't want you to dislike the term individualism. I am just giving you the term through the lens, through the context of racism and white supremacy, so that when you are approached by someone who says, we are all individuals, and you know that's not the case, you can answer them with, that is not the case. And unless racism is dismantled, which will automatically get rid of white supremacy, See, because when if racism, if the system that was designed years ago to perpetuate, sustain, and maintain the ideology is dismantled, then there is nothing that can be used in order to deny and discriminate and apportion on a limited basis. Everybody is equal then. Everybody can be individual. Everybody can actually be independent and self reliant. I'm going to put, I don't know whether anybody wants to come up on the panel, but as always, I'm going to, because this is a classroom and I'm not the only one that's supposed to be talking. So I'm going to put the link down. And if you'd like to come up and discuss this, keeping within the context, the framework of the discussion, please feel free because we talked about history and we talked about individualism. And if you'd like to come up and discuss it, feel free. Hi, Ernestine. Hey. Hello, Queen Judah. I hope that you enjoyed. I really sincerely hope that you enjoyed the discussion and that you got something out of it. That you can, and also, if you've got, if there are words that you'd like me to break down, if they apply within the racialized lexicon of American English and culture, let me know. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Celie Smith, and you can message me there. And I'm on TikTok. I think you can message on TikTok. I'm not sure. So, if you would like to participate in that way, you can as well. I definitely enjoy participation. I'm going to get ready and go. I'm getting ready to dismiss class because I see that there are no questions. But until the next time when we meet, do understand that my mission is always to educate and enlighten and empower. And I'll be doing that for at least the next 30 years. Those of you who have heard me talk about my age, you know what I mean. That's going to be for the rest of my life. If I'm so fortunate to live to be 100. Talk to you later.